This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Ash and Team Valor. We resume our tale on Harry's 12th birthday. Instead of going unacknowledged like it was in canon, Sirius and Remus have pulled out all the stops to celebrate their boy's special day, with everyone gathering at Sirius's flat for the party. As family, it is only natural for Andromeda, Ted and Dora to be invited, though they are not the only ones, as the entire Weasley and Granger clans are also on the guest list, though the latter are unfortunately unable to attend due to work, with Hermione giving their apologies when she arrives. Nonetheless, this does not dampen the mood in the slightest, with Harry being delighted to see everyone after an inextricable drought of mail, and so does not waste a second reuniting with all his loved ones, as well as making a few new acquaintances, such as Ron's younger sister Ginny, who seemingly cannot stay in the same room as Harry, prompting Ron to joke that Harry doesn't smell that bad, and his elder brother Percy, who Harry has seen in passing as a fellow Gryffindor, but has not had all that much to do with. What follows is a joyous afternoon filled with a variety of party games, such as Pin the Tail on the Easel, a harder game that's sound since the paper feline does not stay still, instead running throughout the room and squeezing between guest legs, and Candy Quidditch, in which Sirius or one of the other adults enchants a small sweet to fly through the air, while everyone else has to try and catch it in their mouth with no use of their hands. Finally, it comes time for the cake, a giant snitch courtesy of Mrs. Weasley, which everyone sits down together to enjoy. As they eat, they get to talking, with Dora questioning if Harry ever got that funny postcard she sent him, to which the boy honestly answers that he didn't. This results in a string of questions from both Ron and Hermione, as they ask if this is why Harry never wrote back to either of them, earning them a shrug as Harry explains that he hasn't received a single letter all summer, with the guests agreeing that this is strange. Perhaps one of the protective charms Sirius put on the place when Harry was a baby has begun to degrade, and is now counting mail as a threat or something like that. However, the answer is in fact something even more bizarre, as when Fred and George pass Harry's room on the way to the bathroom, they let out a joint exclamation of "Blimey!" before declaring that someone got Harry a house elf for his birthday. Figuring this is another of the twins' pranks, no one bothers to check this for themselves, with it therefore coming as a great surprise when they come wandering down the stairs with a small house elf standing between them. Good-naturedly, the elf introduces himself as Dobby, bowing low as he does, though before he can do much more, Sirius bluntly asks what he's doing in his house. Due to having blood ties to his mistress Narcissa, Dobby cannot ignore the implied order to speak, and so states that he has come to give Harry Potter a warning. There is a plot to make most terrible things happen at Hogwarts school, so for his own safety, he must not go back. This causes a silence to fall upon the room for a moment, until Sirius speaks up again, dismissively calling this rubbish, before demanding to know who Dobby serves. Once more the elf answers truthfully, stating that he serves the House of Malfoy, with this all but confirming Sirius' suspicion that Dobby has been sent here as part of some juvenile attempt by Draco to ruin Harry's birthday. Refusing to allow this, Sirius orders Dobby to get out, and to stop bothering Harry, with the green-eyed elf having no choice but to regretfully snap his fingers and vanish. From here, the party is able to return to its usual joyful state, with the group laughing about Malfoy's obvious prank by the end of the night. Due to having such a good time, it is ultimately decided that Ron and Hermione will spend the next fortnight here as Harry's guests, with the plan being to meet up at Diagon Alley when it comes time to get their school supplies. As expected, Harry, Ron and Hermione have a great time, with Sirius and Remus being happy to see how much Harry has blossomed over the last year, with it seeming like no time at all has passed before the day of the meetup arrives. Thanks to having experience with flu powder due to growing up in the wizarding world, Harry does not botch the name of Diagon Alley when his turn comes, meaning there is no issue as Sirius and Remus lead the kids to Flourish and Blots, which was the assigned rendezvous location. This is also the site of Gilderoy Lockhart's book signing, making the store rather packed, though even in the crowd, Lockhart has no problem spotting the boy who lived, and so glides over to pull him in for a picture, only to be stopped as a hand clamps around his wrist. Looking up in surprise, Lockhart sees Sirius scowling at him, something of the fierce black dog in his stare, as he states that Harry isn't a prop to be used for photo ops, and they're just here to buy books like everyone else. Looking a little affronted, Lockhart protests that there's no need for hostility, he just thought Harry might like a photo with his new teacher. Though when Sirius lets out a low snarl, the Glory Hound takes the hint and backs off. Curiously, Hermione asks why Sirius was so harsh with that guy, with Sirius explaining that Lockhart was a few years below him, James, and Remus at school, and he was always a vain, self-aggrandizing prat who'd sell his own mother for the tiniest scrap of attention or glory, so the kids, especially Harry, should be careful of him. since if he's really going to be a teacher, he'll try to use them for his own ends. As if to prove this point, Lockhart uses that moment to announce his intentions to gift Harry his collected works free of charge, with this both serving to make him look philanthropic and getting him that photo for the Daily Prophet he had wanted. In contrast to Sirius's low view of Lockhart, Mrs. Weasley is deeply enamored with this act of generosity, offering to get those signed for Harry, though knowing that the Weasleys aren't as well off as him and Sirius, he instead offers the books to her so that she has one less set to buy, an act both Sirius and Remus praise as being just like prongs. Unfortunately, one person who is far less complimentary is Lucius Malfoy, who steps forth to introduce himself to Harry, while slyly commenting that it must be nice to be the famous Harry Potter, being showered with gifts and attention wherever he goes. As one, Sirius and Remus form up on either side of Harry, with Sirius growling at Malfoy to get his hands off his godson. Though unfazed by this aggression, Lucius instead casts a supercilious eye over the assembled group, which includes the Weasleys and Grangers, before snarling this is quite a showing. Muggles, half-breeds and blood traders all flocked together. How quaint. However, instead of getting a rise out of them as he had hoped, he's instead met by a look of cold contempt, as Sirius scornfully states that he'd rather be a blood trader than a Death Eater. This accusation causes quite a stir, though cool as ever, Malfoy Sr. simply sniffs, as if they have a bad odor, then exits the store, having unbeknownst to anyone but himself deposited something in the pile of books Lockhart had presented Harry. From here, nothing of note occurs for the rest of the day, with Harry, Ron and Hermione going home with their respective families, but promising to meet up again at platform 9 3/4 on September 1st. Finally, the day arrives, and so Harry, Sirius and Remus arrive at King's Cross, having taken a Muggle taxi for the fun of it, though this does mean they are almost late. As a result, it is something of a mad scramble to the platform, with the family charging headlong at the innocuous brick barrier and then passing right through, just as they always have. The two marauders then help Harry onto the train, before sharing a fond goodbye, in which Remus tells him to be good, while Sirius tells him to have fun. Two somewhat contradictory instructions. Though all the same, he promises to do his best and contact them often, before joining Ron and Hermione for what is ultimately a very normal train ride. Thanks to this, there is no impediment to Harry and Ron attending the opening feast, where they, along with Hermione, Fred, George and Percy, all cheer on Ginny as she's sorted into Gryffindor. From here, the first week goes as canon, aside from Ron not receiving a howler and his classes being easier due to his wand being intact. Unfortunately, this means Lockhart is exactly as insufferable as canon, pulling Harry aside to give him tips on how to be a celebrity, as well as setting that ridiculous test about himself. However, that is not the worst of it, as worse than all that, worse even than hardly anyone remembering that his favourite colour is lilac, is what he does next, when he unleashes a cage of Cornish pixies upon the class before fleeing, leaving Harry, Ron and Hermione to clean up this mess with freezing charms. If serious words were not enough, this at last convinces Hermione that Lockhart is a buffoon, with her quickly dropping any admiration she had for his so-called achievements, and even beginning to note a few discrepancies in his recountings. Following this tough first week, Harry is very much looking forward to the weekend, though there is one thing he had not accounted for: Oliver Wood. As on Saturday morning, Wood wakes Harry bright and early for Quidditch practice, stating that he's devised a whole new strategy for them to win the cup this year. Truthfully, Harry is more interested in pillows than cups right now, sleepily telling Wood as much. Though refusing to be denied, the Quidditch captain insists his seeker get up, dragging him and the rest of the team out of their beds to give them an hour-long lecture about tactics that no one is particularly receptive towards. By now, half of Gryffindor Tower are awake, with Ron and Hermione accompanying Harry and his team down to the Quidditch pitch, only to be dismayed when 7 green-clad figures are already there. Heatedly, Wood protests that they had the pitch booked for this morning, though Marcus Flint, the Slytherin captain, reveals that they have special permission from Snape, as they need to train their new seeker, Draco Malfoy. This news comes with the revelation that Lucius purchased the entire Slytherin team Nimbus 2001s, causing Hermione to jeer that at least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in. Flushing an ugly pink, Malfoy spits back that no one asked what she thinks, before spitefully calling her a filthy little mudblood. Wham! Harry's fist collides with Malfoy's nose, causing blood to spray everywhere as the pale boy staggers, while Harry snarls at him to take that back, knowing precisely how vile that term is. Clutching his face now, Malfoy retorts that Potter will pay for that, though this does not get the reaction he had expected, as in a resigned voice, Ron sighs that if they're already going to get in trouble, they might as well make the most of it, before whipping out his wand and blasting Malfoy point blank with a slug vomiting curse, being equally appalled by his use of the term mudblood. As expected, Harry and Ron both get detention for this, though neither much mind, as to them it is a fair price for standing up for a friend. Not to mention the memory of a bloody slug poking out of Draco's nostril after he tried to staunch the vomiting will give them something to laugh about for years to come. As for the nature of their detentions, Ron is assigned to clean the trophy room with Filch, while Harry is forced to help Lockhart answer his fan mail by request of the professor himself. It is dull, tedious work, made worse by Lockhart's sermons about how fame is a fickle friend, and how celebrity is as celebrity does. Though this is all shoved from Harry's mind when suddenly he hears an unfamiliar guttural voice utter the chilling phrase, "Come to me, let me rip you, let me tear you." Understandably, this causes Harry to jump, though seemingly having not heard anything. Lockhart dismisses this as Harry getting sleepy, and so allows him to go up to bed, though in truth sleep is the last thing the boy wants to do, as this voice still lingers in the back of his brain. From here, September bleeds into a wet and chilly October, with this making everyone irritable, though no one more so than Filch, who thanks to developing a cold has become extra vindictive, punishing students for having muddy shoes, or in Harry's case laughing when Crookshanks startles Mrs. Norris after she starts stalking him with a glare of preemptive judgment. Deeming this as an attack on his beloved pet, Filch declares that he'll have Harry in detention for a week, while also threatening to have that orange furball expelled from the castle. Thankfully, before this punishment can be made official, nearly headless Nick saves Harry with help from Peeves by creating a ruckus in another part of the school, earning him the boy's gratitude as he asks if he can do anything to repay the ghost. Happily, Nick replies that it would be a boon if Harry would show up to his death day party, since even among ghosts the boy who lived is an impressive friend to have, and feeling indebted, Harry agrees. And so it is that on Halloween night, Harry along with Ron and Hermione, who he roped into joining him, descend past the Great Hall and the Halloween feast to instead gather in a musty dungeon surrounded by the dead. To say it is a bad time would be an understatement, with Hermione being harassed by the ghost of the girl's bathroom moaning Myrtle, while Harry and Ron go hungry, as all the food is decayed so the ghosts can taste it. As a result, they are all immensely relieved when they are able to slip away. That is until Harry hears that disembodied voice again, this time stating that it is time to kill. Turning to Ron and Hermione, he asks if they can hear it too, though to his chagrin they cannot, leaving it up to him to lead the charge as he gives chase, desperate to find the source before it is able to harm anyone as it so evidently wishes to do. However, it seems that he is already too late, as when he rounds a corner into a flooded corridor, he sees two grisly sights. First, Mrs. Norris strung up by her tail, apparently dead, and second, a message written in blood on the wall. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware. Unfortunately for Harry, Ron and Hermione, it is at this moment that the Halloween feast lets out, with the entire school arriving just in time to see the three of them standing in front of the bloody message, and the dead cat. Despite the murmuring that accompanies this sight, Harry clearly hears Malfoy's voice through the din, a cackle to his tone as he declares, "You'll be next, mudbloods," with this being more than enough provocation for the hungry and scared Harry to yell back, asking if Malfoy wants a reminder of what he'll do to him if he keeps using that word. However, before he can make good on this threat, the looming figure of Filch appears before him, grabbing Harry and shaking him as he accuses him of killing his cat. Thankfully, Dumbledore is there to allay the caretaker's fears, though not his rage, by revealing that Mrs. Norris has merely been petrified and can be cured by a mandrake restorative draft as soon as the mandrakes Professor Sprout is growing and matured. All the same, Filch demands Harry pay, screeching that he has it out for his cat after the incident with Crookshanks, though defiantly, Ron sticks up for Harry here, saying everyone hates his cat since she's a bloody menace. As this claim causes several students to smirk or even mumble their agreement, Dumbledore is inclined to agree, stating that Mr. Potter is not the sole inhabitant of this castle with a motive to do Mrs. Norris harm, and so should not be pronounced guilty without evidence. He then instructs everyone to return to their common rooms, with Harry, Ron and Hermione joining the throng of students as they make their way up to Gryffindor Tower, using this as cover to have a private conversation now that the moment of tension has passed. Ron and Hermione question Harry on this voice he heard, with Hermione going so far as to suggest he tell Dumbledore, though here Ron disagrees, stating that even in the Wizarding world, hearing voices no one else can isn't a good sign. again. Siding with Ron, Harry decides to keep this under his hat, though not from everyone, as when he is safely back in his dorm, he pulls out his mirror and uses it to contact Sirius. Faithful as ever, Sirius responds almost immediately. His face along with Remus's appearing in the mirror, and upon seeing Harry's drawn expression, they ask what's wrong. Likewise, at the sight of his two father figures, Harry is at last able to unburden himself, recounting the events of tonight and its connection to the night with Lockhart, as well as revealing his deep worry about the situation and the fact that he alone can hear the mysterious voice. This does deeply trouble the two marauders, though it is plain to see that neither think Harry is crazy. Instead, they worry that this is another plot to target him by dark forces like Dobby had said, with Sirius telling Harry to notify him if he starts hearing voices again. As for the Chamber of Secrets being opened, here Sirius is far less concerned, saying he and the Marauders discovered every secret Hogwarts has, so if it's not on the map, it doesn't exist, and its name is likely just being invoked by some prat who wants to add grandeur to their actions. However, on this he and Remus are in disagreement, as being more level-headed, Lupin states that it would be arrogant of them to think they found every secret Hogwarts has to offer, adding they never went looking for the chamber, since they believed it to be a myth, but perhaps they were wrong in that assessment. Either way though, Harry should keep his guard up and take the Marauders map with him whenever possible, since it's a good resource to have in troubled times. This proves good advice in the days to come, not because of any monster, but rather because in the aftermath of the incident with Mrs. Norris, the majority of the student body seem to have decided Harry is the one who opened the chamber, the so-called Heir of Slytherin as it were, and so regard him with fear and suspicion. As a result, he, Ron and Hermione have taken to using the secret passages listed on the map while travelling to and from class, in order to avoid as much baleful staring from their fellow students as possible. During this time, they also learn the history of the Chamber of Secrets from Professor Bin, who explains that according to legend, Salazar Slytherin built the chamber and placed a monster inside, so that one day his descendant would rid the school of Muggleborns permanently. This goal immediately brings one name to the trio's mind, with it taking very little convincing to persuade them that the one who opened the chamber is none other than Malfoy. However, this hunch alone is not enough to go on, with Harry, Ron and Hermione quickly figuring they need proof, or at least a confession before they go to Dumbledore. Thankfully, being the brilliant witch she is, Hermione knows a way in which they can get the latter, suggesting the Polyjuice potion, which will allow them to change their appearance to look like anyone they want, ideally people Malfoy feels comfortable enough to share his secrets with. To this end, she begins brewing the potion with a little help from a clueless Lockhart, as it is his signature taken under the guise of an autograph, which allows her to borrow out the restricted potions book. Though even with this, it will take over a month to brew, meaning for now at least they will have to bide their time. Refusing to be entirely idle, Harry suggests they seek advice from Sirius on how to carry out their plan in the meantime, since if they're going to be breaking rules by doing this, why not bring a veteran rule breaker in to help them out? Seeing the logic in this, Ron and Hermione agree, with Harry bringing the two-way mirror into Moaning Myrtle's bathroom where the potion is being brewed, so they can have their conversation in peace. Here Sirius does prove quite useful, as upon hearing their plan, he makes several suggestions as how they can best minimize their chance of being caught, or the plan otherwise backfiring, such as getting the rare ingredients from Snape's private store, though Harry suspects this is more just Sirius's attempt to antagonize his old enemy. His primary suggestion, however, is the proposition that instead of each of them taking the potion, only two of them should, while the other tails them under the invisibility cloak. This has two benefits. Firstly, having a look at who can move unseen and warn them of trouble and when the potion's effects are ending is far more valuable than a third fake Slytherin. And secondly, with no disrespect to Hermione, if this potion goes wrong and poisons them, it's better to have one friend who can drag them to the hospital wing. He then laughingly recalls how he and James learned that lesson the hard way, saying in their 5th year they tried to brew fire whiskey in their dorm, but left it to ferment for too long, and so made themselves incredibly sick, with Moony having to haul them up to Madame Pomfrey while explaining away why they reeked of alcohol. Taking this to heart, it is decided that Ron, as the physically strongest of them, will go under the cloak in case he has to bring them to the hospital wing, while Harry and Hermione drink the potion when it is ready, as they are the more persuasive ones. This at last gives them a plan they can work with, though whether it is one that can succeed, only time will tell. Meanwhile, in the wider world of Hogwarts, the first Quidditch match of the season has arrived, Gryffindor versus Slytherin, with Harry and his teammates going up against Malfoy's lot in their Nimbus 2001s. These superior brooms do allow the Slytherins to score an early lead, with their chasers simply outpacing the Gryffindor ones as well as Wood at the goal, though they do have one weak link, Malfoy himself. Due to still being mad about Harry punching him, he is more focused on harassing and trying to hurt the black-haired boy than he is on actually looking for the snitch, with this coming back to bite the Slytherin team when Harry spots the flying gold ball just above Malfoy's head and begins flying towards it at top speed. Assuming Harry is trying to get payback for everything he's done so far in the game, Malfoy dives to avoid this attack, only realizing too late that his rival wasn't interested in him at all as he soars over his head and snatches the snitch, winning the match for Gryffindor, with no rogue bludger to bother him. As a result, Harry along with all the members of the Gryffindor Quidditch team are showered with praise that evening in the common room as a massive party is held in their honour. Among the many attendees is none other than Colin Creevey, meaning he is not petrified while sneaking out to see Harry in the hospital wing, though oddly enough, Ginny is absent, with Ron commenting on this, since he'd have thought she'd be gushing over Harry like everyone else. However, Hermione is quick to dismiss this, saying that Ginny probably went up to bed early since it's been a big day, with this being as much thought as anyone gives the matter for the rest of the night. The following day, Professor McGonagall goes around getting the names of every student who intends to stay at Hogwarts over Christmas break, with it coming as an immense surprise that this year Malfoy is among that number. Though he gives no reason as to why, Harry, Ron and Hermione are certain that it is so that he can open the Chamber of Secrets and sick Slytherin's monster on someone else with reduced supervision, though this can also work to their advantage, as by staying behind, they will have a perfect time to interrogate him when he may feel comfortable enough to let slip just how he's doing it. To this end, the trio also put their names down to stay at Hogwarts, something their respective families all accept, even if Harry's family are the only ones who know why. However, before term ends, there is still one more school event on the calendar, that being Lockhart's Woeful Dueling Club. Despite having no faith in the so-called defense against the Dark Arts Professor, Harry, Ron and Hermione all sign up, though it quickly proves to be a waste of time, as Lockhart, or rather Snape with Lockhart as a target, is teaching the Expelliarmus spell, which Remus already taught Harry before he came to Hogwarts. Unfortunately, this proficiency proves to be Harry's undoing, as he is called up to give a demonstration alongside Malfoy of all people, which predictably goes wrong, as Malfoy attacks Harry with everything he's got, and in turn this more hot-headed Harry does not hesitate to retaliate in kind, resulting in a fierce duel, until Malfoy pulls out his ace in the hole, the Serpent Sortius spell, which summons a snake right in the middle of the stage. As a wild animal, it instinctively attempts to attack the nearest person to it, with that being Justin Finch Fletchley from Hufflepuff, with Harry in turn yelling out for it to stop. However, this is not what everyone else hears. Instead, a series of aggressive hisses burst from Harry's lips, with this all but confirming Harry is the heir of Slytherin to those who still held doubts. Even Ron and Hermione are amazed, with Ron questioning why Harry never told him he was a parcelmouth when they are back in their dorm. Truthfully, Harry explains that even he never knew, having never done it before, at least not to his knowledge, with Hermione suggesting they ask Sirius, since if anyone would know, he would. Agreeing that this is a good idea, the trio call him through the mirror, finding both Remus and Sirius in their pajamas, but alert and happy to help. Seeing no point in beating around the bush, Harry asks if his guardians knew that he could talk to snakes, with them being just as bewildered as him by this revelation. Though, as an expert on dark creatures, this does provide Remus food for thought, with him asking for a bit of time, since this new information has given him a theory as to what Slytherin's monster might be that he'd like to look into. Unfortunately, time seems to be the one thing Harry and co don't have, as the next morning while scanning the Marauders map for Justin so he can explain what happened with the snake, he sees a name that makes his blood run cold. Slytherin's monster. Frustratingly, it gives no other detail than that, as this is for all intents and purposes the only name it has. Though that is a lesser concern, as when Harry looks to see who is around the monster, he finds it rounding a corner into a corridor where Justin and nearly headless Nick are. Taking off at top speed, Harry tries his best to reach the pair in time, though when he arrives in the corridor, it is already too late, as the monster is gone, and Nick and Justin are petrified. Looking down at the map in the hope of finding where the monster is now at least, he is shocked to see that it is no longer visible, though the same cannot be said for him, as a moment later a transfiguration class lets out down the hall, meaning for the second time now, Harry is seen by a group of students standing over the body of another petrification victim. Hastily stowing the Marauders map so it is not confiscated, Harry watches as Professor McGonagall approaches him, stating she's afraid there's nothing for it now, they will have to pay a visit to Professor Dumbledore's office. However, in contrast to what Harry had feared, this is not so he can be accused of being Slytherin's heir or attacking the victims, but instead, so that Dumbledore can ask Harry a simple question, if there is anything he would like to tell him. Like in canon, Harry lies, saying there's nothing, with Dumbledore seemingly accepting this and letting him go, though as their eyes meet, Harry cannot help but feel as though the headmaster's piercing blue ones are staring right through him. Following this, term finally ends, with Harry, Ron, and Hermione as well as Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle being among those who stay at Hogwarts for the holidays. This provides Harry and Hermione just the patsies they need for their Polyjuice potion, with Hermione collecting hairs from each of the lackeys on Christmas evening after drugging them with sleeping potions hidden in cakes, and stuffing their unconscious bodies in a broom closet. With her prizes in hand, she then returns to Myrtle's bathroom, where Harry and Ron are waiting, and remembering Sirius' suggestion, she and Harry then mix in the hairs and drink a glass each of the vile brew, while Ron watches from beneath the invisibility cloak. Luckily for the trio, they are not poisoned, though nothing in the taste would suggest Polyjuice potion is fit for human consumption, with the transformation that follows being equally unpleasant. However, when the momentary feeling of discomfort has passed, Harry and Hermione find themselves as perfect doppelgangers of Crabbe and Goyle, with Ron stating that if he hadn't seen them transform, he never would guess it was them. Disconcertingly, Hermione's voice then springs from Crabbe's mouth as she thanks Ron for saying so, with the boys having to take a moment to coach her on how to do a passable Crabbe impression. Following this, Ron's still under the cloak and through use of the map leads Harry and Hermione to where Malfoy is, with him joining up with him as he heads back to the Slytherin common room in the dungeon. Here Malfoy and the pair he believes to be his chief cronies lounge on luxurious leather couches, as Harry and Hermione begin to probe him on the Heir of Slytherin. Due to not wandering around aimlessly thanks to the map, they do have longer to interrogate the blonde boy than in canon, though ultimately the result is the same, with Malfoy confessing that he doesn't know who the Heir of Slytherin is either this time or last time, though he wishes he did, since it helped them, especially if they got rid of that mouthy mudblood Granger. This last claim incenses both Ron and Harry, though in a testament to her grit, Hermione as Crabbe forces herself to laugh stupidly, agreeing with Malfoy and calming any suspicion he had been feeling about quote-unquote Goyle's sudden scowl. Thankfully, here too Hermione is able to come to the rescue, stating that Goyle had been complaining of a stomachache, and thus giving them an excuse to leave before they begin changing back, thus ensuring Malfoy is none the wiser to who he'd actually been speaking with. However, this does not feel like a victory for the trio, as when they reach Myrtle's bathroom and transform into themselves once more, they all share a look which clearly says they are thinking the same thing. If Malfoy isn't the Heir of Slytherin, then their investigation is back at square one, without a single lead to go on. Because of this, there is little Harry, Ron, or Hermione can do for the rest of the break, beyond watching the map for any sign of Slytherin's monster, though none appear, with the January semester beginning not long after. This pattern continues for several more weeks, until one evening something happens to Harry that has never happened before. He is contacted via the mirror, rather than the other way round. Wondering what Sirius needs, Harry answers, only to find Remus instead, who explains that he's been doing some research since learning about Harry's parcelmouth ability, and believes he has narrowed down the identity of Slytherin's monster. Figuring Ron and Hermione will want to hear this, Harry calls them to join him, with the trio all gathering as Remus elaborates on his theory, stating first and foremost that he is confident the creature is a snake of some sort, both because that is Slytherin's symbol, but also because if Harry alone can hear it, then it stands to reason it is speaking Parseltongue. This revelation comes as a shock to the three young Gryffindors, though Hermione agrees that it makes perfect sense, kicking us off that she didn't think of it before. Comfortingly, Remus assures her that it took him a while too, though with that said, only two creatures exist that meet that criteria and are also capable of petrification, with those being a Gorgon and a Basilisk, meaning more than likely, Slytherin's monster is one of those. Eager to redeem herself after not seeing the obvious serpent connection, Hermione interjects, adding a logical deduction to Remus's conclusion, specifically the fact that its name on the map being Slytherin's monster means it can't be a Gorgon, since according to the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, they are classified as a being, not a beast, which means a Gorgon would have their own name and identity the map would reflect. Nodding approvingly, Remus agrees that this is very logical, since it would also explain the death that happened 50 years ago, which presumably was caused by the same creature, so for now it would be wise for the kids to operate under the assumption that what they are dealing with is a basilisk. He then looks directly at Harry, and in a slightly tired voice states that perhaps he is wasting his breath asking this of James's son and Sirius's godson, but he would implore Harry not to go looking for the basilisk, since just because he can speak to it does not mean he can tame it, and with suspicion about him already swirling, it would be best if he stayed out of things, and did not give people more reason to assume he is the Heir of Slytherin. However, if there is one thing Harry cannot do, it is stand to the side, especially after having so recently been idle, with the weeks that follow seeing him and Hermione researching basilisks. However, out of respect for Remus, this is not with the intent to confront it, but rather to answer the lingering questions that surround the situation, such as how it's getting around undetected, and more importantly, who's controlling it. While the latter question continually eludes them, as the only thing they can deduce is there must be another parcelmouth in the castle, Hermione is able to develop a theory on the former after examining the Marauders map and remembering Harry's tale of how the Great Serpent vanished from it after attacking Justin and Nick, which is that it is using the pipe network, as they are not shown on the map. This causes Ron to briefly suspect Filch, since he's the only guy who could be messing with pipes and stuff to let the basilisk loose without drawing attention to himself, though Hermione promptly shuts this down for two reasons. One, his cat was the first victim, so it's doubtful he'd have sicked the monster on her, and two, pipes connect to all sorts of things that everyone uses all the time, like baths, sinks, toilets. At once, Hermione is on her feet, bolting off while Harry and Ron have to follow, with her leading them of all places to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, where she more shockingly still calls out for Myrtle herself. Floating over, Myrtle demands to know what the girl wants, her tone conveying her same dislike from the Death Day party. Though perfectly politely, Hermione states that she just wants to know how Myrtle died. Suddenly, the ghost girl's entire demeanor changes, since if there's one topic she loves to talk about, it's death. Specifically her own, with her gleefully recounting how one day after coming into this very bathroom to cry, she heard a boy's voice talking in a language she didn't know. Naturally, she tried to tell him to go away, though the second she opened her cubicle to yell at him, she suddenly saw a pair of glowing eyes and died right there on the spot. This is seemingly exactly what Hermione wanted to hear, with her smiling broadly as she thanks Myrtle, stating she's been very helpful. From behind her, Ron asks in what way that was helpful, since they already know the monster's a basilisk. Though letting out a long-suffering sigh, Hermione retorts that this is confirmation that this bathroom must be where the entrance and exit to the Chamber of Secrets is, since the boy was obviously speaking Parseltongue and giving the monster its orders. Letting out joint exclamations of understanding, the boys then ask Hermione what they should do now, and with a look of determination she says it's simple, they should tell Dumbledore. Making their way up to the headmaster's office, they're able to gain entry with the same password Harry had heard McGonagall use, a fact that is not lost on Harry, as he wonders if that was the true purpose of their meeting before Christmas. All the same, the trio do not stop until they're in front of Dumbledore's desk, where the old man sits waiting, a knowing glint to his eyes, as if this had been a pre-arranged appointment. Smiling, he then asks what he owes the pleasure of this visit by 3 promising second years, with Harry wasting no time for preamble, as he states they know where the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is, and more than that, they know what's inside it. What follows is an in-depth debrief, in which Harry along with Ron and Hermione recount the events of recent months, with certain careful omissions, to avoid revealing the existence of the Marauders map, or their use of Polyjuice Potion, though which ultimately culminates in their conversation with Myrtle today. Throughout this story, Dumbledore listens intently, then when they are done, he thanks them for sharing this information, and bids them to return to their common rooms, and preferably stay there until dinner. Having no objection, the trio do exactly this, remaining in Gryffindor Tower until it is time to head down to the Great Hall, at which point Dumbledore has an announcement to make, that Hogwarts will be temporarily closed for the next several days, so the staff can resolve the current issues regarding the Chamber of Secrets, meaning first thing tomorrow, all students are to board the Hogwarts Express and return home. At once, a string of muttering run up the house tables, though in contrast to others brought on by the Chamber of Secrets, this has an unmistakably hopeful overtone, with everyone believing that this means the crisis is at an end, as Dumbledore and the teachers will surely be able to vanquish Slytherin's monster, and life can go back to normal. However, it seems there is still one more horror to rock Hogwarts tonight, with that coming a few hours later, when a white-faced Percy, told by Professor McGonagall, enters the Gryffindor common room. This is odd on 2 counts. Firstly, Percy is a prefect who'd been on patrol that evening, which does not usually end until midnight, and secondly, McGonagall only comes up to the tower to deliver very serious news or warnings. Unfortunately, this is no exception, as in a slightly trembling voice, the Transfiguration teacher explains that the Heir of Slytherin has left another note in the same place as the first one. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. More will follow if you attempt to gain entry. Then, if that were not bad enough, Percy speaks up, his voice barely more than a squeak as he looks to his brothers and utters a single word: Ginny. Understanding the meaning of this, Ron, Fred and George all furiously demand to know what the teachers are going to do to rescue their sister, though here McGonagall can only shake her head and reply that she doesn't know, before ordering everyone to go to bed, as they have a train to catch in the morning. Naturally, Harry, Ron and Hermione have no intention of doing this, with it being clear to all 3 of them what they have to do, since with the teachers being unable to act for fear of more students being taken, it is up to them to go down there and rescue Ginny, with time being of the essence. Heading back up to Harry Harry and Ron's dorm, the trio gather the cloak and map, as these will allow them to reach the bathroom unimpeded. Though wisely, Hermione also suggests they bring Harry's nimbus and the mirror, the former since if they have to drop down a hole like last year, they'll need a way to get back up, and the latter in case they need to call for help, since the Heir of Slytherin and Basilisk will probably be waiting for them. Thanks to carrying a long broomstick, Harry, Ron and Hermione have to crouch to ensure the cloak covers them all completely, though with the cover of night on their side, they are able to reach Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, where they immediately split up, in search of anything that could be an entrance. This does take longer than expected, as their natural inclination is to search objects with larger openings like toilets and floor grates, though while passing by the grand bank of sinks, Ron spots the little S carved as a snake in one of the faucets. Calling his friends over, he points this out, with Hermione praising this discovery, while Harry squints, trying to visualize the carving as a real snake. Then, when he thinks he's got it, he speaks, uttering the word for open in parcel tongue, and watching as the sinks clear away to reveal a deep hole with no visible bottom. Climbing onto the nimbus, which struggles to hold all three of them at once, the trio then descend, touching down on a large pile of small animal bones, though thankfully from a quick glance they're able to tell that none are human. Making their way through the corridor that lies ahead, Harry, Ron and Hermione quickly come across a giant shed snakeskin, which tells them the basilisk must definitely live down here, with Hermione wisely taking point as she pulls out the mirror and uses it to look around turns, since that way at worst she'll get petrified rather than dying if the monster is nearby. Finally, they reach the chamber itself, finding it to be spacious, watery and adorned with a giant statue of Slytherin himself. Though to their surprise there is no monster waiting, nor is there anyone who might be the heir of Slytherin. Instead, they simply find an alive and well Ginny clutching a small diary. Letting out a sigh of relief, Ron rushes over to her, asking if she's okay, but from the look on Ginny's face, she doesn't even seem to hear him, her eyes being locked squarely on Harry. While Ginny acting oddly around Harry is nothing new, when she steps past her brother and begins to speak, it is with a voice not her own, instead being the voice of a young man who smirks that he'd been hoping Harry Potter would come down here to rescue little Ginny. Furiously, Harry demands to know what this stranger wants with him and why he's using Ginny, with the voice explaining that he is Tom Riddle, and that in his present state, he lacks a body, and so has to settle for possessing this silly little girl, adding that if he had more time, he could have manifested one, but Harry's meddlesome investigation forced him to speed up his timeline, though this is not the first time Harry's deprived him of a body. Coldly, Harry retorts he doesn't know what Riddle is talking about, causing the stranger wearing Ginny's face to sneer as he pulls out her wand and writes his name in the air, Tom Marvolo Riddle, before waving the wand and rearranging the letters into the phrase, I am Lord Voldemort. At once, horrified silence fills the chamber until Riddle breaks it, stating that he discarded the name Tom Riddle long ago as it was his filthy muggle father's name, in favor of a name the world would know and fear, which is only right for one who is directly descended from Salazar Slytherin through his mother's side. From Harry's side, Hermione states that he's the one who's been opening the Chamber of Secrets, both now and 50 years ago, hasn't he? To which Riddle sneers that he's surprised a mudblood could figure that out. Yes, he knows who all three of them are, since little Ginny's been writing about them, pouring her soul into his diary, into him, providing him with both knowledge and the power to overcome her. What a stupid little girl. But no matter, since she has proved very useful, as now he has a body through which he can get his revenge on Harry Potter. He then demands Harry duel him, the implied threat of what he will do to Ginny if he refuses, forcing the boy to comply. Urgently, Hermione begs Harry not to do this, since it's obviously a trap. But with resolve, Harry says he knows, but he doesn't have a choice, a fact Riddle smirkingly confirms, stating that Potter lacks the willpower to abandon this girl, just as he lacks the guts to strike her down to stop him, meaning this will be a very short duel, as he finishes what his future self started on that night over a decade ago. He then raises his wand, ready to utter the words which will end Harry's life, only to go rigid as a spell hits him from behind, and Ginny's wand goes flying out of his hand. Turning back, he sees the Weasley boy clutching both his wand and his sister's, while in response to the shocked look his friends are giving him, he exclaims that this Riddle bloke's an evil nutter who kidnapped his sister. Why shouldn't he hex him when his back's turned? Having no argument, Hermione instead suggests they try and prise the diary out of Ginny's hand, as that might be what's controlling her. However, before they can get close, Riddle starts hissing, giving a single command in parcel tongue, kill. As the only one who understands this, Harry yells at Ron and Hermione to run, while he does likewise, hearing the sound of the basilisk as it begins emerging from its den. Looking round, Harry sees his friends heading back down the tunnel they came through, a good idea, as they can get to the Nimbus and escape, though only if something distracts the great slithering monster, or rather, someone. Trusting a hunch that Riddle, and by extension the basilisk, is more interested in him than Ron and Hermione, Harry makes a sharp turn away from the exit, instead sprinting deeper into the Chamber of Secrets, and as he had hoped, the sound of slithering does not fade, meaning the monster is chasing him, and his friends are safe. Unfortunately, that is the one thing Harry himself is not, as before long he comes up against a dead end, quite literally in fact, as to stay where he is means being torn to pieces by the basilisk, but to turn back means facing its killing glare, and meet his end that way. It is a rather hopeless position, and as the sound of scraping and slithering gets closer and closer, Harry does the only thing he can think of, the same thing he did at the dueling club when confronted with an angry serpent, the thing Remus said he couldn't do, and so commands it to stop. Suddenly, all sound of movement ceases, and turning around slowly while keeping his eyes firmly on the ground, Harry sees the basilisk's tail stationary before him. Naturally, this both bewilders and infuriates Riddle, who yells from the other end of the chamber for the basilisk to kill Potter, screeching that he is the heir of Slytherin, so it must obey him. However, this just seems to confuse the conflicted beast, as it is being torn between two masters, each of whom contain a fragment of Voldemort's soul, and who are giving it contradictory commands. However, there is one key difference between Harry and Riddle, that being the fact that the diary's soul fragment is of Voldemort in his youth, when he is inexperienced, and has not yet come into his own, whereas the piece inside of Harry is from a Voldemort at the height of his power, making it the one the basilisk would be more inclined to listen to. That, coupled with the strength of his convictions, and his innate charisma which was allowed to flourish under Sirius, rather than being stifled by the Dursleys, is enough to give Harry the edge, granting him complete control over the basilisk, as he commands it to stand down. Now the tides have decisively turned, as Riddle has no monster, no wand, and no body to call his own, leaving him little choice but to roar in impotent fury as Harry along with the now-returned Ron and Hermione level their wands at him. Then, as one, they each unleash a freezing charm, as the twisted enraged look on Riddle Ginny's face reminds them all of the pixies they dealt with back on the first day of class. This combined spell is enough to freeze Riddle in place, with Hermione commenting that this is giving him a taste of what his victims experienced, before hastily making good an original plan of pulling the diary from Ginny's grip, while Harry and Ron carry her body. Since the broom definitely cannot hold four of them, Ron with Ginny's body goes up first, then drops the Nimbus down to Harry and Hermione, so that when the latter pair make it up and head for Dumbledore's office, they see the headmaster himself, along with McGonagall, Snape and Madame Pomfrey, carefully examining Ginny, who lies strewn across the desk. It is a tense scene, with Harry and Hermione joining Ron on the side, as they wait for someone to say something. Then, after what feels like forever, Dumbledore speaks, clear relief to his tone as he states that Miss Weasley should be capable of making a full recovery. She just needs plenty of rest, and of course no further contact with Tom Riddle's diary. Speaking of which, he then holds his hand out to Hermione, requesting the book, and when she dutifully surrenders it, he briefly flips through its pages, before gingerly placing it inside a drawer, promising to keep a close eye on it, as he conducts some research into how Tom was able to possess poor Ginny. Worriedly, Harry asks what if Riddle tries to possess him too, though with a twinkle of his pale blue eyes, Dumbledore replies that if he may be immodest for a moment, he has a far stronger constitution than an 11-year-old girl, so Lord Voldemort will find no purchase in his mind. This comes as something of a shock to Harry, having not imagined that Dumbledore knew Riddle was Voldemort, though with a faint smile, the old man explains that he taught Tom Riddle in his youth, saying he was a talented, charismatic young man, with a penchant for breaking rules, not unlike Harry himself. However, Harry should not trouble himself wondering if this means he is going to become like Voldemort, as it is a person's choices that show who they are, and today Harry chose to be brave and selfless, and for that, Ginny, Dumbledore himself, and all of Hogwarts owe him and his friends their deepest gratitude. What follows this encounter is a shockingly quiet 3 months at Hogwarts, as with no threat of Muggleborns being attacked, life begins returning to normal, and everyone can focus on their studies. As thanks for their efforts in stopping Riddle and the Basilisk, Harry, Ron and Hermione are each given special awards for services to the school, along with a cumulative 600 points for Gryffindor, a fact which all but guarantees first place in the House Cup, and earns them much praise from their housemates. Furthermore, due to the Gryffindor-Hufflepuff Quidditch match not being cancelled, Harry's team were able to claim another decisive victory, earning them a place in the Quidditch finals against Slytherin, who they trounce once again, granting them the Quidditch Cup for the first time in almost a decade. even if it comes at the cost of Wood declaring they'll be starting practice even earlier next year to ensure they hold on to the title. Additionally, after much pleading from Hagrid, he is allowed to start caring for the basilisk, albeit while wearing a blindfold so he doesn't peek, with him quickly coming to love the giant monster and considering it a beauty. This is how Harry truly gets to know him, as during the early visits, he is asked to come along and ensure the basilisk doesn't try to eat the gamekeeper, which sees the pair becoming friends, with Harry, Ron and Hermione even being invited around to Hagrid's hut for tea, where they learn he is an avid, but terrible baker. Speaking of friends, during this time, Harry, Ron and Hermione also make sure to check in on Ginny frequently, finding that she's doing much better, having fully recovered from Riddle's possession, though she clearly blames herself for what happened, since she let the book into her mind by confiding in it, with this being something she'll have to work through on her own, though at least now she has the support of her friends and family. Finally, the end of the school year rolls around, with several changes coming as a result, the first of which being that Harry, Ron and Hermione are forced to pick their electives for next year. As is her way, Hermione takes everything, while on Sirius's advice, Harry and Ron take care of magical creatures, since that's always good to know, especially after what happened with the basilisk, and Muggle studies, since it was one of his favourite subjects at school, and he thinks the boys would do well to learn more about Muggle stuff, having spent all their lives in the wizarding world. As for the second change, it is a highly welcome one, that being the news the mandrakes have matured, with this seeing Justin, Nick and even Mrs. Norris return to normal. Almost as welcome as this is Lockhart's resignation as defense against the dark arts professor, since according to him, his book sales have plummeted since he's been cooped up in Hogwarts rather than doing press events, with Fred and George even volunteering to throw him a goodbye party, though this is mostly so they can give him a cake laced with aging potion, and watch his horrified reaction when he sees an old man's face in the mirror. And so it is that Harry, Ron and Hermione's second year at Hogwarts comes to a close, with the trio parting ways at platform 9 3/4, though with promises to catch up over the holidays, and maybe even stay over at one of their houses like they did after Harry's birthday. They then all head off to join their families, and as Harry sees Sirius and Remus waiting for him on the platform, he gives them each a hug, glad to be home after a very long year. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.